Okay, so here's a rundown of the key points from Quiz 5. So the first question, Octavian versus Antony. There are a number of things that we can talk about here. The first is that from the beginning, Octavian has Julius Caesar's name. And this is of vital importance for representing what everybody wants to happen, which is that everything that Caesar stood for be continued. Caesar is the personal heir, the successor of Marius, and Octavian is the personal heir, the successor of Caesar. And so, the name itself is of immense importance. Not only this, but the first actions of the triumvirate are to avenge Caesar's name by going after the assassins. And so, the everything that follows from that, the burial of Caesar and the all the way up to the Battle of Philippi and beyond, all of that stuff that happens immediately after Caesar's death is still about Caesar. It's still about Caesar. It's still about avenging Caesar, about counteracting the actions of the assassins, about retaliating and avenging Caesar. It's about Caesar, and so Octavian stands in the place of the family, of the heir of the name. Everything else Antonius gives to him. First of all, Antony is a competent general, but he isn't very well liked. He had to act as Caesar's enforcer during the parts of the dictatorship where Caesar is out of Rome. Antony is in Rome taking care of things, and he doesn't make any friends here. He's acting in a very brusque and brutal way, enforcing Caesar's will on Caesar's behalf. Caesar much more charismatic, much more genial, able to make friends, in any situation. Antony doesn't have that capacity, and so rubs everybody the wrong way, even while Caesar is alive, especially while Caesar is alive. Um, and so after Caesar's death, Antony, has the military expertise that Octavian doesn't have, but he has very little support among the military and certainly amongst the masses, where Octavian is easily well positioned. And because of Philippi being credited to both of them, Octavian is able to stand side by side along with Antony, even in military terms at this point. But the most important factor of all, of course, is the fact that Antony decamps to the east and becomes immersed in Eastern ways, and becomes symbolic of the idea of the future of Rome being in the East, where all these other decadent civilizations are. And while this may be, in a sense, justifiable in terms of the trajectory of the Roman Empire, it's absolutely the wrong point of view to have in terms of winning over people in Rome. And so Octavian, being in Rome, is able to make himself be about Rome. Antony then compounds this by taking up with a foreign queen, Cleopatra, the one world ruler there is in the Mediterranean that is still not part of the Roman Empire. And he not only marries Cleopatra, but sets aside his wife, Octavia, who is A, Octavian's sister, but B, the paragon of the ultimate Roman matron. So this is Antony set aside everything Roman. He set aside everything about Roman virtue, and Octavian is able to position himself not as one of two rivals for the position of leader of the Populist Party. He's able to position himself as the true Roman, as the champion of Rome, which is exactly what everybody wants. And so Antony does everything wrong in terms of perpetuating his position amongst the Roman people, and Octavian is talented enough, shrewd enough to take every advantage, to leverage this as much as humanly possible. He demonstrates immense acumen in terms of leadership by placing himself in the position of being the successor not only to Caesar, but to all of Roman history. What were some of the ways Greek culture affected the Romans in the late Republic? The main thing to get across here is the Greek language becomes essential to the idea of being educated. So first of all, education itself becomes more prevalent and broader within the amongst the Romans, but the foundation of education becomes based in knowledge of Greek. And in the ancient world, knowledge of Greek means the study of the Iliad and the Odyssey. This is true for the Greeks, it's true for the entire Hellenistic East, and now the Romans, who are essentially making themselves the preeminent culture within the Hellenistic world. And so this means the Romans begin their education studying the Greeks. However, they're bringing in of the Greek language, of Greek literature, and Greek sculpture and architecture and philosophy and practice of history. As I made the point in other videos, the Romans bring in all these elements of Greek culture and are influenced by these ideas. But by and large, what they do is, in terms of architecture, in terms of philosophy, in terms of sculpture, in terms of literature, they use Greek techniques as tools in order to say Roman things. All these relationships had a major impact. Okay, so the answer here is Lepidus, and this is emphasizing the fact that out of the triumvirs, you have Antony, you have Octavian, and then as an also ran Lepidus, who is very much a second string kind of Roman leader. He doesn't have any significance, even while he's working for Caesar and functioning as his Magister Equitum, which is the second in command of the dictator. It's still Antony that does all the actual moving and shaking. It's still Antony who's the agent and enforcer of Caesar's rule. This says a good deal about Lepidus's character and or lack thereof, and his support base. The point of this question is to talk about how a lot of influence in this period comes from relationships between men and women. And so we have Antony and Cleopatra, which has a negative impact on Antony's career. We have Octavian and Lelia, which has a positive impact on Octavian's career, immensely positive, because Lelia is Octavian's partner and continues to be so once Octavian becomes Augustus. And so this plays into the last question, which has to do with the condition of women in the late Republic in terms of the nobility. Roman noble women are becoming, have greater access to education, have greater agency within their families, and are able to practice greater influence in private and also to a certain extent in the public world, which is to say that Romans hear about strong voiced women that represent Roman virtue. We hear about Hortensia. We hear about Octavia. We hear about Livia. Before this, we hear of Cornelia, the mother of the Gracchi. Toward the late Republic, we start to see women that have a public profile because they stand for what Romans want in women, which is not subservience, which is not meek quietness and passiveness. What they want is the Roman matron who is able to forthrightly defend and perpetuate Roman customs, Roman beliefs, and Roman virtues, and ensure the continuity of these things into the future so that men can worry about war and politics. And so all these things we're going to be talking about. In terms of the lower classes, you want to make sure that you're thinking in terms of the prevalence of female slaves in the domestic workforce and ex-slaves, freed women, and we'll be talking more about slave women and freed women being a very widespread presence within the Roman homes and especially in the provinces. and the lower class Roman women that are not slaves or freed women, that are actually from the citizen class, in some ways they have a certain disadvantage compared to the slaves, because the slaves and freed women occupy sort of fixed roles, and they have sort of guaranteed position, even though it's obviously as an underclass. Poor Roman women of the citizen class often have to struggle to find occupation and a way of contributing, and so there are fewer options available to them in some ways. And they end up with certain kinds of menial jobs and less opportunity than either slaves or women from noble families. So that's this week's quiz, and we'll talk more about this in the discussion.